Okay, well, this is the route that we've been following. The Israelites have made from their exodus from Egypt. We're following the red line here, and this evening we're in the final part of this journey there, where the red line takes us up on the eastern side of the Dead Sea. So this is the part of the journey that we'll be looking at this evening. Last week, from Numbers chapter 20, we saw the deaths recorded there, both of Miriam and Aaron, Moses' older sister and brother. And we saw also the incident of the water that Moses brought from the rock after the complaints of the people. And somehow the manner in which he had done that led to God announcing that Moses and Aaron would not be allowed to enter the promised land. That somehow their actions there had been an expression of their lack of belief or that lack of sanctifying God in the eyes of the people, and so they would have to not be allowed to come into the land. We saw also how Israel had attempted to pass through the territory of Edom, their brother nation, but the king of the Edomites wouldn't allow them to do so, and so they'd had to take a detour to go around Edom. And then the chapter ended there with the death of Aaron on Mount Hor, and Aaron being succeeded by his son Eleazar as high priest. So that's where we are in the journey this evening, and we're picking up the story here in Numbers chapter 21. So we begin here in the first three verses of Numbers chapter 21, which says, "When the Canaanite, the king of Arad, who dwelt in the Negeb, heard that Israel was coming by the way of Atharim, he fought against Israel and took some of them captive. And Israel vowed a vow to the Lord and said, If thou wilt indeed give this people into my hand, then I will utterly destroy their cities. And the Lord hearkened to the voice of Israel and gave over the Canaanites, and they utterly destroyed them and their cities. So the name of the place was called Hormah." Israel's first victory over the Canaanites here then took place at this a location named Hormah. This had been the scene of an earlier defeat of the Israelites when they attempted to enter the land after God had forbidden them to do so. This was back in Numbers chapter 14. Here, the Canaanite king of Arad, and Arad was an important city in the Negeb to the south of the land of Canaan, when he heard that the Israelites were coming his way by the way of Atharim, he fought against them and took some of the people captive. The Israelites then made a vow to the Lord, saying that if the Lord would give these people into their hands, then they would destroy all of their cities. So the Lord took note of their vow, and he gave the Canaanites into their hands, gave them victory over these Canaanites. So they destroyed the Canaanites and their cities as they had vowed to do so. And the place where this happened was given this name, Hormah, a name which means destruction. This victory really was an early anticipation of the victories that would come when the Israelites finally enter the land. It may be difficult for us today to understand why God would allow or why God would call for the complete destruction of whole groups of people, such as these Canaanites. It seems inconsistent with the character of a good and a loving God. However, this must be understood in the context of Israel as God's chosen people. So God calls for the destruction of these other nations in order to protect the identity of Israel as his own people, that they may not turn away from him and worship the other gods of these nations. And we see this explanation given in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verses 1 to 4. which says, when the Lord your God, this is Moses addressing the people of Israel before they go into the land. He says, when the Lord your God brings you into the land which you are entering to take possession of it and clears away many nations before you, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than yourselves, and when the Lord your God gives them over to you and you defeat them, then you must utterly destroy them. You shall make no covenant with them and show no mercy to them. You shall not make marriages with them, giving your daughters to their sons or taking their daughters for your sons. For they would turn away your sons from following me to serve other gods. Then the anger of the Lord would be kindled against you, and he would destroy you quickly. So the purpose for destroying these other nations was to protect the identity of God's people, that they may not turn away and worship these other gods. But also, God was using Israel as his instrument of judgment against these nations because of the wickedness of those nations. And this is explained in Deuteronomy chapter 9, verses 4 and 5. Again, Moses is speaking to the people here. Do not say in your heart, after the Lord your God has thrust them out before you, it is because of my righteousness that the Lord has brought me in to possess this land, whereas it is because of the wickedness of these nations that the Lord is driving them out before you. Not because of your righteousness or the uprightness of your heart are you going in to possess their land, but because of the wickedness of these nations, the Lord your God is driving them out from before you, and that he may confirm the word which the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. So there we see that it wasn't because Israel was more righteous or better than these other nations, but rather that God was using Israel in order to bring judgment upon those nations because of their own wickedness. So on the map here, we can see the location of where this conflict with the Canaanite king of Arad took place in the Negev there, and Hormah is marked there as the place where this took place, and where the destruction of these Canaanites occurred. So at that point is where Israel is when that happens. We move on then to chapter 21, verses 4 to 9, and we have another interesting incident here. Uh, Reading from verse 4 then, from Mount Hor they set out by the way to the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom, and the people became impatient on the way, and the people spoke against God and against Moses. Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no food and no water, and we loathe this worthless food. Then the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, so that many people of Israel died. And the people came to Moses and said, we have sinned, for we have spoken against the Lord and against you. Pray to the Lord that he take away the serpents from us. So Moses prayed for the people, and the Lord said to Moses, make a fiery serpent and set it on a pole, and everyone who is bitten, when he sees it, shall live. So Moses made a bronze serpent and set it on a pole, and if a serpent bit any man, he would look at the bronze serpent and live. So after the death of Aaron on Mount Hor, the people had to continue their journey by going around Edom, as the Edomites would not allow them to pass through their land. As we saw this last week in chapter 20, verses 14 to 21. So their new route took them initially in the direction of the Red Sea. But as has happened so often on this journey, the people become impatient and they complain against God and against Moses. And it's the same old complaint as we've heard previously, like a broken record. Why have you brought us up out of the land of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no food and no water, and we loathe this worthless food. This is the last recorded time that the Israelites make this sort of complaint about their food. And they describe the manna which they loathe as worthless food. This was really an expression of their contempt or their ingratitude, their lack of appreciation for God's provision for them. Elsewhere, the manna is called the bread of angels and bread from heaven. Psalm 78, verses 24 and 25. Describes it in this way. Psalm 78, verse 24. He rained down upon them manna to eat and gave them the grain of heaven. Man ate of the bread of the angels. He sent them food in abundance. And then in Psalm 105 and verse 40, Psalm 105, verse 40, they asked, and he brought quails and gave them bread from heaven in abundance. So God had provided abundantly for the people, and yet they regard it as worthless food, which they have come to loathe. Well, this time, in response to their murmuring and their complaining, the Lord sent fiery serpents amongst the people, which bit some of them, and many of them died. The description of the serpents or snakes as fiery probably describes the effect of the lethal bite of these snakes, or perhaps the colour of the snakes. Well, seeing what was happening, then the people went to Moses and they acknowledged their sin, confessed their sin, that they had spoken, they say, against the Lord and against Moses, and they asked Moses to pray for them, that the snakes might be taken away from them. So the Lord then instructed Moses to make a copy of one of these serpents in bronze and set it up on a pole. And being set on a pole, it would be something that could easily be seen by the people. And then, if anyone was bitten by a serpent, they are to look at the bronze serpent on the pole and they will live. It's perhaps a bit puzzling as to why God instructed Moses to make this serpent, which later became an object of worship, and it was destroyed in the time of King Hezekiah's reforms. This is mentioned in 2 Kings chapter 18 and verse 4. Which really goes to show how long the people kept hold of this serpent. This is an account of King Hezekiah and his religious reforms. Hezekiah was one of the good kings of Judah. And verse 4 of 2 Kings 18 says, he removed the high places and broke the pillars and cut down the Asherah. These are all of the things that are used in the false worship. And then he broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moses had made. For until those days, the people of Israel had burned incense to it. It was called Nehushtan. So later, then we see that this bronze serpent, the people were burning incense to it, treating it as some sort of object of worship, an idol of some kind. So Hezekiah then destroys it. But here, to go back to the story in Numbers chapter 21, in order to benefit from God's healing power, those who had been bitten by the snakes would have to look towards this bronze serpent in an act of faith and trust. That this is how God has said that they can be healed, and this then is what they must do. So there's no magical healing power in the bronze snake itself. The power to heal comes from God. Uh, but faith that God can heal them, comes through them looking at the bronze snake, and that's what will give them life. Jesus used this incident as an illustration of his own crucifixion. and the life that he can give to those who look upon him. So in John chapter 3, verses 14 and 15, which is Jesus' conversation with Nicodemus, at the end of that conversation he has with Nicodemus, Jesus says, "And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whoever believes in him may have eternal life." Jesus spoke of himself as being the Son of Man who must be lifted up, and being that being a reference to his being lifted up upon the cross. And he says that whoever believes in him may have eternal life. So just as it required faith on the part of the Israelites to be healed of their snake bites, so it requires faith on our part if we are to be saved by Jesus. Well, we continue on the journey now in Numbers chapter 21, verses 10 to 20, heading towards Moab here. And the people of Israel set out and encamped in Oboth, and they set out from Oboth and encamped at Ie Abarim in the wilderness, which is opposite Moab, toward the sunrise. From there they set out and encamped in the valley of Zered. From there they set out and encamped on the other side of the Arnon, which is in the wilderness that extends from the boundary of the Amorites, for the Arnon is the boundary of Moab, between Moab and the Amorites. Wherefore it is said in the book of the wars of the Lord, Waheb in Suphah, and the valleys of the Arnon, and the slope of the valleys that extends to the seat of Ar, and leans to the border of Moab. And from there they continued to Beer, that is the well of which the Lord said to Moses, "Gather the people together, and I will give them water." Then Israel sang this song, "Spring up, O well, sing to it, the well which the princes dug, which the nobles of the people delved with the scepter and with their staves." And from the wilderness they went on to Mattanah, and from Mattanah to Nahaliel, and from Nahaliel to Bamoth, and from Bamoth to the valley lying in the region of Moab by the top of Pisgah, which looks down upon the desert. So the Israelites are nearing their destination now, and verses 10 to 13 of this passage records the different stages that they passed through on that final part of the journey. We don't know for certain the locations of the various places that are mentioned here, but they appear to be traveling north on the eastern side of Moab. God, though, would not allow them to go into Moab, to go through Moab. We can see this in Deuteronomy chapter 2, verses 8 and 9, which is Moses' account of this part of the journey again. So Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 8 says, "So we went on away from our brethren, the sons of Esau," that's the Edomites, "who live in Seir, away from the Arabah road from Elath and Ezion-Geber, and we turned and went in the direction of the wilderness of Moab. And the Lord said to me, Do not harass Moab or contend with them in battle, for I will not give you any of their land for a possession, because I have given Ar to the sons of Lot for a possession." So God would not allow the Israelites to go into the land of Moab. The Moabites were the descendants of Lot, and Lot, as you recall, was Abraham's nephew. So there's a family connection here as well as with the Edomites. So they're not allowed to go through Moab. So they have to bypass that, really, as in the same way as they did Edom. Verses 14 and 15 of the passage here are interesting. This is a poetic quote from a work which is described there as the Book of the Wars of the Lord. So a quotation from this. It is said in the Book of the Wars of the Lord. Then we have that little poem there, which is recalling this part of the journey. But this is the only reference in the Bible to this work, to this Book of the Wars of the Lord. We don't know anything else about it, and it no longer is no longer in existence. There is another writing which similar, which we no longer have as well, which is called the Book of Jasher, and this is quoted uh, in Joshua chapter 10 and verse 13. Does not really have anything much to do with the journey here, but just to show that there were these other writings that were around which we don't have anymore. So Joshua chapter 10, verse 13 uh, says, Sun, stand thou still at Gibeon, and thou moon in the valley of Ajalon. And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed until the nation took vengeance on their enemies. Is this not written in the book of Jashar? The sun stayed in the midst of heaven. So a quotation there from that unknown work, the book of Jashar as well. 2 Samuel chapter 1, verse 18 is also a quotation from that book. So some kind of book of poetry or poetic descriptions of different events. And in 2 Samuel chapter 1, verse 18, it concerns the deaths of Saul and Jonathan. David laments their death. David lamented with this lamentation over Saul, Jonathan, his son. And he said it should be taught to the people of Judah. Behold, it is written in the book of Jasher. And then there's the song that the lament of David there. So we have these writings, the book of the wars of the Lord and the book of Jasher, which we really know nothing more about other than the little that is quoted here in the Bible itself. Another uh, we move on here, verses 16 to 18. We have another song here, a piece of poetry as well here, which talks about God's provision of water at a well. Verse 16 says they continue to beer, and the word beer, Hebrew word beer, means a well. So the people dug a well there, and the words of a song sung by the people to mark this occasion there in verse 17, Israel sang this song, Spring up, O well, sing to it, the well which the princes dug, which the nobles of the people delve, with the scepter and with their staves. The final stages of the journey are recorded there in verses 19 and 20, which brings the people into the region of Moab, by the top of Pisgah, which looks down upon the desert. So this is a mountainous plateau of Moab on the eastern side of the Jordan. And from there, the people would be able to look to the west, look across the Jordan, and they would be able to see the land of Canaan that they are soon to enter. We can see on the map here roughly the route that they have taken at this point in the journey, going from Mount Hor, where Aaron had died. They bypass Edom and Moab, and they'll come into that area to the north there of where the Amorites are. But the green two green marks there underline the Zered River and the Arnon River, which are mentioned here in the passage we read. Verse 12 says, they set out and encamped in the valley of Zered. That's the river there. And then from there they set out and encamped on the other side of the Arnon, the second green line to the north there, which is in the wilderness that extends from the boundary of the Amorites. For the Arnon, this river is the boundary of Moab. So that Arnon River forms the boundary of Moab between Moab and the Amorites to the north there. So to reach their objective of the promised land, they have to pass through this land of the Amorites. And we see, continue on with the story here, verse 21. down to verse 30, which says, Then Israel sent messengers to Sihon, king of the Amorites, saying, Let me pass through your land. We will not turn aside into field or vineyard. We will not drink the water of a well. We will go by the king's highway until we have passed through your territory. But Sihon would not allow Israel to pass through his territory. He gathered all his men together and went out against Israel to the wilderness and came to Jahaz and fought against Israel. And Israel slew him with the edge of the sword and took possession of his land from the Arnon to the Jabbok, as far as to the Ammonites, for Jazer was the boundary of the Ammonites. And Israel took all these cities, and Israel settled in all the cities of the Amorites, in Heshbon and all its villages. For Heshbon was the city of Sihon, the king of the Amorites, who had fought against the former king of Moab, and taken all his land out of his hand as far as the Arnon. Therefore the ballad singers say, Come to Heshbon, let it be built, let the city of Sihon be established. For fire went forth from Heshbon, flame from the city of Sihon, it devoured Ar of Moab, the lords of the heights of the Arnon. Woe to you, O Moab! You are undone, O people of Chemosh. He has made his sons fugitives and his daughters captives to an Amorite king, Sihon. So their posterity perished from Heshbon as far as Dibon, and we laid waste until fire spread to Medeba. So, in order to reach the Promised Land, Israel would have to go through Amorite territory. So they sent a message to Sihon, the king of the Amorites, to ask permission to pass through his territory. And the request is very similar to the one that they had made to the Edomites back in chapter 20. They say they will stay on the king's highway, this main route, a trading route, he says, until they have passed through. But like the king of Edom before, Sihon would not allow the Israelites through, and he went out to fight against them at Jahaz. So the Israelites could not go round, they couldn't avoid this conflict because they had to pass through this territory in order to reach the River Jordan and beyond that the Promised Land. So in the battle they were victorious and they took possession of Sihon's land and from the Arnon to the Jabbok and the two rivers marked there underlined with the green on the little map there. You can see from the Arnon in the south to the Jabbok is the river to the north there, which forms the border with the Ammonites. And we're told that they settled in the cities and the villages of the Amorites, including Heshbon, which was the capital city. Deuteronomy chapter 2 verses 26 to 37 is another account of this when Moses is addressing the people here and he's recalling this once again. Deuteronomy 2 verse 26, he says, I sent messengers from the wilderness of Kedemoth to Sihon, the king of Heshbon, with words of peace, saying, Let me pass through your land. I will go only by the road. I will turn aside neither to the right nor to the left. You shall sell me food for money that I may eat, and give me water for money that I may drink. Only let me pass through on foot, as the sons of Esau who live in Seir and the Moabites who live in Ar did for me, until I go over the Jordan into the land which the Lord our God gives to us. But Sihon, the king of Heshbon, would not let us pass by him, for the Lord your God hardened his spirit and made his heart obstinate, that he might give him into your hand as at this day. And the Lord said to me, Behold, I have begun to give Sihon and his land over to you. Begin to take possession that you may occupy his land. And the account goes on further there to record what we've seen already here in Numbers. This settlement of the land there by the Israelites didn't occur immediately, but it would happen eventually after the land of Canaan had been conquered, and that be recorded in Numbers chapter 32. Verse 26 here provides a sort of little side note, a historical note, explaining that this Sihon, King Sihon, had originally taken possession of this land by fighting against the Moabites, the former king of Moab. And there's this song, so another piece of poetry we've got here, this song that is sung by the ballad singers who are recalling this victory of Sion over the Moabites there in verse 27 down to verse 30. Verse 29 refers to the Moabites as the people of Chemosh. Woe to you, O Moab, you are undone, O people of Chemosh. And Chemosh was the name of the god who was worshipped by the Moabites. And we have other references to Chemosh, the Moabite god, in 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 33, where Solomon, when he got involved with foreign wives and began to worship their gods, Chemosh is listed as one of those that he was worshipping there as well. Well, we have another battle coming up now in verses 31 to 35. Um, the end of chapter 21 of Numbers here. Thus Israel dwelt in the land of the Amorites, and Moses sent to spy out Jazer, and they took its villages and dispossessed the Amorites that were there. Then they turned and went up by the way to Bashan, and Og, the king of Bashan, came out against them, he and all his people, to battle at Edrei. But the Lord said to Moses, do not fear him, for I have given him into your hand, and all his people and his land, and you shall do to him as you did to Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt at Heshbon. So they slew him and his sons and all his people, until there was not one survivor left to him, and they possessed his land. So the Israelites consolidated their position on the eastern side of the Jordan by defeating this Og, king of Bashan. The Israelites dispossessed the Amorites at Jazer, and then Og, the king of Bashan, which is further to the north, came out to fight against the Israelites at this place named Edrei. And the Lord spoke to Moses then to reassure him that Og would be given into his hand, and they would take possession of his land, just as has happened to Sihon. The victory is summarized there in verse 35. So they slew him and his sons and all his people until there was not one survivor left to him, and they possessed his land. Again, from Deuteronomy, we get a more detailed account of this in Deuteronomy chapter 3, verses 1 to 11. And of particular interest, there's a note there in verse 11 concerning the size of Og's iron bed. In verse 11 says, for only Og, the king of Bashan, was left of the remnant of the Rephaim. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. Is it not in Rabbah of the Ammonites? 9 cubits was its length, and 4 cubits its breadth, according to the common cubit. So 1 cubit is 18 inches. So 9 cubits long was this iron bed. So that's what, about 13.5 feet, I think, and 4 cubits or 6 feet in breadth. So he was a big man, this Og, and he had a big bed, a strong bed. Before Israel crossed the river Jordan to take possession of the land of Canaan, then they'd now gained the control of the eastern side of the Jordan. This is the former territory of Sihon and Og, extending from the Arnon River in the south to Mount Hermon in the north, which was a distance of about 130 miles. Again, that account in Deuteronomy chapter 3 and verse 8 there mentions these the extent of their occupation of that land. Deuteronomy chapter 3 verse 8, So we took the land at that time out of the hand of the two kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, from the valley of the Arnon to Mount Hermon. So say it's about 130 miles. So they've now occupied the eastern side of the Jordan really by defeating these two kings there. And this land on the eastern side would eventually be settled by uh, the tribes of Reuben and Gad and by half of the tribe of Manasseh. And that account is given in Numbers chapter 32 there. But the importance of these victories over Sihon and Og are to be seen in later references to them, in which God is attributed with granting these victories to the Israelites. So we have reference to them in Joshua chapter 2 and verse 10, which are the words of Rahab in Jericho after the spies have gone to Jericho to spy out the city there. And Rahab says to them, "For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings of the Amorites that were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. And as soon as we heard it, our hearts melted, and there was no courage left in any man because of you. For the Lord your God is he who is God in heaven above and on earth beneath." So she understood these events to be a demonstration of the greatness of God, the greatness of the Lord. Then in Joshua chapter 9, verses 8 and 10, another reference made to them here by the Gibeonites who are trying to find acceptance amongst the Israelites. They say to Joshua, "We are your servants." And Joshua said to them, "Who are you and where do you come from?" They said, "From a very far country your servants have come." They hadn't really, they were there in the land. "Because of the name of the Lord your God, for we have heard a report of him and all that he did in Egypt and all that he did to the two kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, Sihon, the king of Heshbon, and Og, king of Bashan, who dwelt in Ashtaroth." So again, these victories are seen by these people as a demonstration of the power of God. God cannot be resisted. In the book of Judges, the judge Jephthah makes reference to these events in Judges chapter 11. Well, the whole passage, verse 12 to verse 28. We won't read through it, but he makes reference to uh, these events here. Verse 20, he says, "Sihon did not trust Israel to pass through his territory, so Sihon gathered all his people together and encamped at Jahaz and fought with Israel. And the Lord, the God of Israel, gave Sihon and all his people into the hand of Israel, and they defeated them. So Israel took possession of all of the land of the Amorites who inhabited that country." So a reference made to them there. Nehemiah chapter 9, verse 22 is a prayer by Ezra, and he makes reference to these kings as well. And then in the Psalms, we have Psalm 135, verses 10 to 12. Speaking of God, God's actions in Egypt, and verse 10, that God smote many nations and slew mighty kings, Sihon, king of the Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan, and all the kingdoms of Canaan gave their land as a heritage to his people Israel. And then finally here, Psalm 136, verse 17, this words of praise to God for his steadfast love. "To him who smote great kings, for his steadfast love endures forever, and slew famous kings, for his steadfast love endures forever. Sihon, king of the Amorites, for his steadfast love endures forever. And Og, king of Bashan, for his steadfast love endures forever, gave their land as a heritage." These victories over these two kings, Sihon and Og, were remembered throughout Israel's history and seen as a demonstration of God's power and God's faithfulness. So these lands that Israel conquered then were on the eastern side of the Jordan, were really a guarantee of more to come, more conquest to come when the people would finally cross the Jordan into the land of Canaan. So despite all of the setbacks that they've been through and the rebellions and the disobedience and the murmurings of the people throughout their journey, God is still with them. God is still showing them mercy and guiding them to their eventual goal. And he brings them now to this verge of entry. So God remains faithful to his promises. That God had promised to be with them, promised to take them into the land, and we see God keeping that promise. And that's a reminder to us also of the faithfulness of God, that when God promises something, we can be sure that he keeps his word, that he is faithful to his word.